We're going to have a conversation about justice. But before we do that, we are going to have a proverb from DJ CT.
One who has yet to learn to walk cannot climb a ladder.
One who has yet to learn to walk cannot climb a ladder.
Yes.
From?
This is an Ethiopian proverb.
Okay.
Yes. Now the msikizaji who had a request, Monday.
Monday will be a Luo proverb.
Yes.
Okay. Note it down, some IOU. So, City, this Sunday, I can tell you what the verse in church is going to be.
Which church?
Every church, man.
Okay. Where the
churches that you go to, where they should be talking about the things that we are talking about.
Okay. Please go ahead.
No, John tells me just log up. Even just log up will have it. Okay. Luke chapter 4, verse 18 to 19. Shall I read?
Yes, sir. Please read.
Okay. Shall
I read?
The Spirit of the Lord is on me, because he has anointed me to proclaim good news to the poor. He has sent me to proclaim freedom for the prisoners and recovery of sight for the blind, to set the oppressed free, to proclaim the year of the Lord's favor.
That's a nice verse.
Lovely, isn't it?
It's a very nice verse. The bit about setting the captives free. Yes. I particularly like that one.
Good. Now, that will be the theme for this Sunday, because this Sunday is Justice Sunday. What we're calling it actually Freedom Sunday. Now, what is Freedom Sunday? All those things are what we're going to discuss. We are joined in the studio by Esther Njuguna. She's a senior coordinator for survivor services at the International Justice Mission. And by video link, Joseph Kariuki, lead communications and media at International Justice Mission. Good morning to you, Esther.
Good morning,
Welcome
Eric.
to Kenya's biggest conversation, the Situation Room.
Asante.
We call this the hot seat, but because you're coming in peace.
I come in peace.
And the Spirit of the Lord is here with us. This is not going to be the hot seat. It's just going to be a warm seat for you.
All right, thank you.
However, Joseph, because you chose not to come,
and because he thinks that distance will make his seat less
hot. Joseph, good morning.
Good morning, Eric. Good morning, Muga and Du.
Good morning.
Good to have you joining us.
Thank you for hosting us this morning.
Let's start with you, Esther. Just tell us, what is International Justice Mission? And then Joseph will tell us about this Sunday.
Yeah. So International Justice Mission is a human rights organization, and we work in 24 different offices around the world, dealing with everyday violence, just around engaging or working with people living in poverty, to ensure that we are rescuing victims of this everyday violence, that we are bringing perpetrators to accountability, that we are restoring survivors. So it's not enough for them to seek justice. We want to restore them to a place of strength. And then we also want to ensure that there's justice system transformation, where that everybody can actually access justice, and we can ensure that our systems are working, that everybody is treated fairly, that I'm sure if I want to seek redress, then I know I can get it. I know how to go about it. So, and we work in multidisciplinary teams. So we'll have social workers, lawyers, investigators working on cases, so that we're able to identify different gaps. And our vehicle is usually casework. So working on individual cases to identify these gaps in the criminal justice system. Yeah, so in a nutshell, that's what we
You've
do.
said violence a number of times.
Yeah.
And various forms of violence. What kind of violence are we discussing?
So in Kenya, in different parts of the world, they focus on different things. But in Kenya, we focus on police abuse of power and child sexual violence. So those are the two areas that our work focuses on. Yeah.
In order for work to focus on it at this level, are we saying that there is quite a high, in terms of percentage, proliferation of these cases of violence in the country?
Yes, there is. You'd be surprised by how many cases, how many stories we get to hear, how many victims we get to work with who have suffered this kind of, this kind of violence.
Surprise us. Tell us, on a weekly basis, on a monthly basis, on a yearly basis.
So, like if you'd go to, let's say, for example, when we'd go to court, would have a case of child sexual violence. I could be going to court every day. And I mean, we are not like a national, we're not like so many, we don't have so many cases like in our pipeline, but we'll be going to court every day on a case of child sexual violence.
A different case every day?
A different case. And then, people coming to us for referrals on cases of police abuse of power, seeking police accountability. They would be coming in and you would see the effect. Like one case would have, different victims around it. So the cases are many. The stories are heartbreaking, but that's why we're here.
I'm particularly interested in getting to ask or getting to know. Are there specific areas or specific places where you see a preponderance of these cases as opposed to others? And if so, what reason do you prefer? Or why do you think this is so?
Yeah. So in Nairobi and Kiambu counties, and specifically because of, the number of people who are living, below the poverty line. So, and just the policing around that, we haven't experienced proper policing in Africa or in our country as well. So because of that, just the number of people in these areas, then you realize the cases are very high because poverty makes people vulnerable. Just lack of, strong economy or strength makes you vulnerable just because of the area that you live in. So that's why you see very many high cases in Nairobi and Kiambu just because of its proximity to the city. Yeah.
Obviously, IJM is stepping in to these cases. Are we saying that there is not enough government institutional involvement in order for an organization to have to step in? And it's dealing with so many cases. So what does that paint in terms of a picture of government institutional involvement?
And that's why we are talking about justice system, strengthening, because we have good laws. We just need enforcement of those laws. We need to see people actually doing what they're supposed to do, duty bearers doing what they're supposed to do, instead of cases where you see duty bearers being the ones breaking the law. So when I began, I joined IJM 15 years ago. The platform has been different. And I might not be a lawyer or an investigator, but I've had a front seat just because of that multidisciplinary approach in our work. I've had a front seat to this area, so I'm able to see the landscape. So when we began, especially in cases of child sexual violence, many cases were coming to us and they were unreported because they are sure that if they go to the police station, they were turned away. Then we have seen that changing just because of the lobbying, the organizations that are there. If you look like in Kenya or in Africa, in terms of policing, I mean, we have so many G4S security groups, right. Because they are trying to meet a need. Yep. Because you're not assured that the police will respond, or there'll be a response when you need security. So that's why you're seeing a growth in that. So all these organizations coming in to try and meet a gap. So, but we are here because ultimately the government has a responsibility to take care of its citizens and to enforce the law. So we work closely with them to ensure that we are strengthening or building that, continuing to build that capacity, so that you, me, anybody else, receives. There's equity in the way the law is enforced.
I almost heard you say that your background as a psychologist isn't quite as important as that of the lawyers and other players in this field.
Absolutely not. Absolutely not.
My thinking exactly, because you see, we are talking about problems and our response to these problems. But how often do we get to ask what it is that brings about this problem, the genesis, the causes, because that's the real problem. What we see are the symptoms, the outcomes of what the real problem is. Now, the question I'm asking is, how do you people get to understand the causes, the root causes of these problems? And when you do, and if you do, how do you go about trying to mitigate?
So we've talked about how poverty makes people vulnerable.
Yes.
And the root cause, even as we try, all of us, when you're philanthropic, people responded in taking people to school, being a sponsor, and things like that. But if you don't change the structures and the systems, you just meet one part of the need. So what we have identified is that if there's equity in terms of the way justice is distributed in a country, then you see, if there is law enforcement, then you see issues like corruption that makes the judiciary not have enough resources, because there's a huge backlog because of that. The government says they don't have money to give judiciary. Judiciary is saying, give us money so that we can be able to administer justice. And we are seeing that being systematic. People are vulnerable sometimes because of the systems that are in their country. So for us, that is what we have identified as a root cause. So, and in meeting this, what we have done is that we work with our survivors, and because sometimes the cost of justice is very high. It's very easy to say that just go to court and report, but for our victims, we've realized even fare to come to court. I want to seek justice, I really do, but even the fare to come to court, I don't have. Look at our coastal office. You see, like the courtroom is 150 kilometers in Bamba, and a client needs to go there to actually seek justice. So issues of access.
Yeah.
And other than that, we've come to court, there's court delays. I can think of cases where, in fact, we just concluded a case that has been in court for the last 10 years, a child sexual violence case. What that means for that victim is that they'll never move on. They'll never move on. There will always be this cloud hanging over their head.
Yeah.
And so that is why, in terms of mental health support, we want to ensure that the cost of justice is not so high in terms of restoration of this survivor. So, things like that, for me, are important, because even as she goes to school, because IJM might support her to go to school.
Yeah.
She's pursuing to get a career. She might have money of her own, but there's something here that will always hold her back. Yeah, in terms of success. Yeah.
As you continue the conversation, let's contextualize it in terms of why we're having it today. This is Justice Month, and Sunday is going to be Freedom Sunday. So, Joseph, just take us through, what is the Justice Month? What is Freedom Sunday? What activities have you held so far, and what are you lining up?
Thank you, Eric. Freedom Sunday is a global event that was started by IJM, I think in 2018, in partnership with churches all over the world, so that the aim of teaching congregants about injustice and the role that Christian can play in fighting it. So, as my colleague Esther has already said, the problem that people who are poor have is not that they don't have laws. The problem is that there is poor law enforcement, and most people who are poor live outside the protection of the law. And so, why we want to have Freedom Sunday and speak the issue of justice is because we want the congregants to be able to know what is injustice that is facing their community, what can they do about this injustice, how can they bring criminals to justice, for example, the way that we want criminals to be brought to justice, how can we restore survivors, the way my colleague Esther has mentioned, and also we want people to participate in strengthening our public justice system so that people can be able to safely go through the public justice system. Cases can be resolved very fast so that they don't have delays longer. Because you have to appreciate it, Eric, that most of even our political leaders, you can see they troop to churches on Sundays to listen to the Word of God. And we want our leaders in these churches to go through it, speak about injustices in these churches, read statements about injustice, urge them to participate in this. So throughout the month of September, we've been having Justice Month just to speak about issues of health justice. What does health justice mean? What does it mean to access healthcare? Right now, we are going through a pandemic. How has this pandemic affected Kenyans? There's so many Kenyans who have lost their jobs, for example. There's so many Kenyans who are going without food. And what can churches do? What can churches speak to government about? You remember that I think in 2020, the government announced that we are going to give, I don't remember, it was 8 billion to the vulnerable, so that people who are vulnerable can receive these funds. But with us working in the community, so many people never received this money. So where does this money go? So these are the things that we are talking about during this Justice Month. And also the other issues like the issues of family strife that we've continued to see. We've seen a lot of gender violence. We've seen a lot of child sexual violence going on, children sexually abused. So we want to speak about these issues in the church from the pulpit so that people can be able to speak and be informed about them. And then there's the issue of police abuse of power that we work in, and this is a topic that we definitely want to highlight, because I know all of us sometimes come through police abuse of power, or we interact with the law in this aspect. So when you look at statistics, especially during this pandemic time, especially I'll quote Missing Voices, which tracks cases of police killings and enforced disappearances in the country. Last year alone, Missing Voices was able to track 157 cases of police killings and 10 enforced disappearances in the country. And you can see, I think this week you saw, and last week, cases of many bodies that were being retrieved from River Tana. These are people who had disappeared. Their families, I don't know if you watched how many people were trooping to Garissa mortuary just to go and try to identify people who have disappeared for many years. Some disappeared in 2014. They have never been found. You can imagine the agony and the pain that such families are going through. So in a nutshell, we want these discussions to come into the forefront, that Kenyans can discuss it on social media and also on radio like this, so that we can have a way forward on this kind of violence.
Joseph, I assume that IJM has been doing this for a number of years now. What is the impact that you've seen from having several Freedom Sundays? What impact have you seen?
Indeed, we've seen a lot of impact in churches. At the first time we did Freedom Sunday in 2018, we had just a score of churches. I think there were around 67 churches that joined the Freedom Sunday. But this year alone, in Kenya, we have like 800 churches that have signed up to do Freedom Sunday. We've had survivors of violence that are being invited to these churches to go and speak so that you can hear. Sometimes you cannot believe when I tell you about a case, but if you hear a case from a survivor, then you can be able to know the real pain of these cases and violence. Also, we've seen some churches that have come up to take up survivors to educate them, because as an organization, we cannot be able to cater for all these people. But we've seen survivors who have been taken up through schools. Churches have taken up that burden. We've seen churches that are started to speak about violence. We've seen Bishop Olesapit of the ACK Church, who even on Sunday read a statement about Freedom Sunday. He's talked about the issue of justice and what we are called to do. And other leaders, even in formal settlements where this violence festers a lot, we've seen so many churches come in. And so I think we are happy that the church is taking this call for justice. Yeah.
Well, I mean, call it human nature, Joseph, Esther, call it human nature. But, even as we are saying that, there's got to be a rallying around for the people of the country to understand some of these. Perhaps we cannot understand them until we really hear the nitty-gritty of some of these cases and what people are actually going through. I'm more likely to resonate. People are more likely to resonate when you hear or experience the horror that somebody else might have gone through, for you to say, hold on a minute, is this actually what is happening? So, Esther, tell us some of the things that you actually run into for people to understand the gravity of some of the things that we are talking about right now.
There's a question you've asked in terms of, impact. There was, in law, there's something known as bond to keep peace. And what bond to keep peace meant is that a police officer looks at you and they think, you look like somebody who's about to commit a crime. Okay. So they take you to court and they say, we've brought you here to promise to be bonded to keep peace. And so if the magistrate asks you, are you going to keep peace? What would you say?
Yes.
Then you're told this amount of money, you have to pay this amount of money to bond you for a year to keep peace. Of course, you don't have that amount of money, so you go sit in jail and wait as you keep peace. You've done nothing wrong. So, and what IJM did, so when we engage, and that's what we're talking about, our casework. So when we would go to prison to visit and would realize and would wonder, what are these guys doing who are unattended? They're just here basking in the sun. And the wardens would tell us that, they're keeping peace. And so,
in prison.
So what happened is that our lawyers went to court and, and had to have that removed because, it's just really unfair. And when you look at cases like that, or like guards, I remember one case where a guard was in town, is at night, and he sees a commotion. He's guarding a building and he sees a commotion happening somewhere. And so it was a police officer who was fighting, there was a barrel, and he lost his gun. And so this guard who had just gone to see, curiosity killed the cat, who had just gone to see, was arrested and charged. And so by the time we got to meet him, he hadn't done anything wrong, but he had been sitting in prison for 1 year. He couldn't afford bail, and he had just been seated. And he was, we found an old, angry man because he hadn't done anything. All he did was to
witness.
And then so they found somebody to just accuse for that crime. So, and it's things like that. And I've met so many clients like those.
Esther Njuguna, she's from the International Justice Mission, and joining us via video is Joseph Kariuki, also from International Justice Mission. Freedom Sunday is coming up this Sunday. We'll be focusing on injustice in the country. And Esther, you're giving us this interesting look at the work that IJM has done so far. Bond to keep peace. Arrested, loitering with intent.
But what I'm asking
taken to
is,
court.
For such a law to exist, was this a colonial law?
Yeah, some of those are
Yeah, it's those ones.
Because
loitering with intent.
It's because I'm thinking syndromically. You just look at somebody, and you look like a criminal. And so, because you look like a criminal, I am going to prevent you from committing a crime, or I'm going to bond you so that you don't commit a crime. Are there any cases of situations where, or you've heard of, where people have been brought forward in that way, and indeed there were people...
They are known criminals.
Yes.
Yeah, but how would you know that without evidence? You see,
well, if you're a police officer, let's just look at it objectively.
Yeah.
You're a police officer, you work in a community.
Yeah.
You know the two small petty criminals of that community.
Because they also tend
and
to be
the big
informers.
Criminals of the community.
Yeah.
You come across this guy. It's 3 a.m. He is alone, going somewhere. He has not committed a crime, but you know his history. What do you do as a police officer?
No, that's
escort him home.
You don't know. You are.
Why is he up at 3?
You don't know, and that's why we want to insist on proper investigations.
Right.
Investigate, say that I have evidence, and that's why we're excited about the decision to charge. Let ODPP decide that there is enough evidence to actually take you to court, so that we prevent people who haven't actually, committed a crime, and we actually force people to actually do their work, so that you're actually taking me to court, and there is evidence to test that whether I've committed this crime or not, so that we are not vulnerable. Otherwise, we'll be very vulnerable. What if it's on a day? And that's why theories like Lombroso theory, where I'd look at you and say, you have features, your physical features that your mother gave you look like that of a criminal, you know? And it's obsolete now because of such things, because we want to base evidence on facts. So it's things like that. So, and, you know, when people are vulnerable, people living in poverty, there are just so many things. People feel like they can walk all over you. And that's what we're saying. Even for clients that aren't supported by IJM, we want it to be equitable for everyone. That if a child goes to court, they know they're going to receive trauma-informed care in the criminal justice system. That, you know, magistrates, prosecutors, police officers are thinking about the trauma that this survivor has gone through in actually making decisions around their case.
You know, what you say is true, because there are histories, especially in countries where people were known to just disappear. Argentina and Chile led in this in the 1970s, 60s, 70s, up to 80s. And they even referred to the term "the disappeared" came from. However, again, if we were to look at this thing in a balanced way, there are extremely many cases where police have unjustly used or unfairly used the powers that have been accorded them. But I have to ask the question, is there reason why they do so? And I'm going to explain why I'm asking this question. If on a daily basis, this is what you do, you try to keep security, God alone knows the sort of people you come across and who you actually know. Now, cases have been brought with regards to extrajudicial killing. Now, I have had occasion to actually speak to law enforcers. And this is what someone told me a while back. He told me, you know, cases such as the ones you hear about where people are killed unfairly exist. He says, but sometimes we are frustrated because you know this is a criminal. You even know what they have done.
You've taken them to court before. Even.
Yes, you know. It's not that you don't know. But something is bungled, the guy is set free. Now he says the problem with this guy being set free is now your life is in danger.
I mean, obviously you have intimate knowledge with a lot of these cases. Are we seeing that is the case? Are we looking at individuals who have not previously had a run-in with the security agencies and just, you know, going along their merry way, innocent in their ongoings? Or are we looking at people who may have a spotty history?
Actually, people who are very innocent. And you see, and I hear what you're saying. And the risk is, what about that person who, yes, that's why there has to be proper policing. Because what about that person who's innocent going by their way? You know, there's a child, a young boy in this slum just on Mombasa Road. I forget Mukuru.
Right. One of the Mukurus.
Yes, one of the Mukurus. So they used to have this church practice in the afternoon, and so he was a son to one of our clients, and so these boys. So he's gone in the afternoon for church practice, Saturday afternoon, and then unawares to him, there's this group of boys who have been reported to have been they had done something. Young boys as well had done something. So they all meet up in church. And then when the police come, there's an execution. And he dies in the process.
Whoa.
Young man, he had not had any issues with the police. He's not done anything. And that's where it finds him. And so when I think about such families and the devastation that comes with that, and while I hear about the balance, I mean, what we'll just call for is proper policing so that we are limiting the number of mistakes. And
it's procedure.
It
makes sense. Yes.
So that I'm thinking, like, you know, I hear Kenyans saying that, you know, today my car was stolen. Don't report yet, because they might shoot me inside the vehicle. You know, you don't want to live with that. You don't want to live with that fear. So, and while I hear that, I mean, we we are working, most of my colleagues are former police officers, so we get to hear also that side of the story and try to balance even as we advocate for change.
Right.
Yeah, so one of the things that we're actually also doing with the police, we are working and understanding the kind of trauma that comes with their work. And so just supporting them and supporting like-minded organizations who are working on issues of trauma healing with the police. So it's not like it's a fight, with the police. Just we just want to advocate,
Understand.
for just proper policing and law enforcement.
Yeah, Joseph, you talked about communicating with the general public. What about communication to these institutions that clearly there is a major issue that's being taken up with here? If we're talking about arbitrary arrests, being made, asking for, explanation on something that you're innocent about. So what about communication to these institutions that are duty bearers? What is that communication supposed to look like, even during this Justice Month, Freedom Sunday, and thereafter?
Yeah, I think just to mention, I'll take you probably back before I answer that about the issue that Eric and City had asked about, are there people who are innocent? And I know the challenge that we have in Kenya is that we have good laws, but the problem is that the justice system is a long process. You start with the investigation, so you have to investigate a case thoroughly, take it to court, and when you take it to court and you have evidence, then the prosecutor can prosecute this case.
Oh, we have an issue there getting Joseph on the line. Let's just see if we can get him back. So in terms of even that, I mean, something you can answer, Esther, in terms of communicating with these institutions, with the entire justice system, the players in the justice sector.
Yeah, those are conversations that we are constantly having. There, and interesting enough, people, I want to be able to do my job and do it well. Right. So there are conversations that we are constantly having, identifying the gaps and realizing who can we lobby, what needs to change so that I can actually be able to do my work. And so even as we talk about issues like decision to charge, where we want prosecutors to look at these files, we also must resource them so that we have enough to actually do this. So in just there are just so many. There's not one way of killing a rat.
Skinning this.
Skinning this. There just has to be different interventions in how we actually approach this. And so coming to Freedom Sunday, that's why we want to have these conversations
with the communities as
where people are sensitized about what is happening. Because before in all honesty, before I worked in IJM, some of these things were they were just passive, but you're just ignorant about it. And so when people who can actually make a difference are ignorant about it, these are not things, they don't affect you, so you're not going to talk about them, you're not going to fight over them, you're not going to hold people accountable.
Joseph is back on the line. And Joseph, as you come back, we're still talking about the communication. When you communicate with the communities themselves, for example, one of the things that you deal with is child sexual violence. This means that the community needs a lot of sensitization on these issues. How do you go about that?
Yeah, so what we do, we engage with communities. For example, last week we were in Mombasa for a CUC meeting, it's a court users meeting, where the community come, the justice sector's actor come. We had a judge from Kilifi, the head judge, we had prosecutors, we had police officers, 5 OCSs who had attended at their community. And in this case, they will just come and listen to the community. We encourage the community on how they can report these cases, the processes, because some of this violence that happens sometimes, especially sexual violence, children, sometimes has been done by a close family member. And because they happen mostly in poor communities, and the father is probably the breadwinner, people do not want to come and report them, because how do I report a husband? And then in the long run, I don't have support even to go through court. I don't have support to take care of the same children. So we want to encourage them. We speak to them. So we have community dialogue in communities. We go to all this community talk about where you can report these cases, the processes of if a sexual offense has happened, what is the process that children can go through. So we continue engaging with this community because it's serious. Like I'm talking about Kilifi, 66% of the cases that come from Kilifi, the entire Kilifi court, are on sexual violence against children. That's a very big number. And in that community alone, they have like 10 cases on a daily basis.
If I can jump in there, Joseph, it just seems as though there are also very many competing issues here. Because, I mean, one thing that Esther has talked about is clear that the poverty issue comes into play front and center. However, here you are dealing with one of the major issues being child sexual violence, which are in many cases, as you've said, and we know, that is perpetrated by close family members in a majority of the cases. So here you have a family that's riddled by poverty, a child in the same family having been attacked sexually, abused sexually by a close family member. What do? Do you seek justice, or do you seek the often offered compensatory award from said family member and the let's talk about it by security forces, or do you say no, I'm going to go with IJM, and try to seek justice for this? Or at that point, that competing issue of food on the table, and here is a family member offering it to you, what do you do?
Yeah, and I think this is definitely, this is a big challenge for such a family, because you have to weigh about you going hungry or reporting this person and the person is incarcerated. And I think the biggest challenge, and one of injustice that we really need to talk about is the injustice that is being perpetrated by the government, and this is poverty. Because the root cause of all these things, I mean, I can assure you, I think 90% of these cases will happen in poor communities of sexual violence. They'll happen in poor community. Why? Because these people are poor. They're living in one-roomed house. The dad is a watchman who works at night. The mom washes clothes during the day. So you can imagine, during the day, this person is in the house with a girl that is just in her teens. So the opportunity is definitely there. And where does this go? It's because of poverty that is there, that people sometimes don't have jobs. They have been left at home. So the opportunity just to come and you know, it's sad that even they are lured by even 50 shillings, 10 shillings as sweets. And you can see the level of poverty that are in this community, that are sweets of 2 bob or 3 bob can lure a child into a sexual violence trap. So, but what we encourage the clients that have come forward, those who have been courageous enough to come forward and report these cases, what, as Esther had said, we help them go through the justice system, because when you go through the justice system and these cases are covered, that someone has been jailed for 20 years, for example, someone has been jailed for life. If people see news of people being held to account for such crime, then there's deterrence, because people will start knowing that if I commit this crime, then there is some consequences into it. But if you don't report, if we don't go to court, for example, people might just think that if this thing can happen, we can do it, and I can go scot-free. So that's why we're encouraging that court should work. We should unclutter court that serious cases like this, because believe you me, courts are full of petty offenses, petty cases, loitering, drunk and disorderly, so you find so many, nearly 50-60% of cases are petty offenses that can be dealt with in a swift manner. But because of our corrupt system, for example, you have a traffic offense. So if you're stopped and you're told you're speeding, for example, you are not sure that the police officer is telling the truth, that you are speeding. So, so the police will either ask you for a bribe. If you refuse to give that bribe, you argue with him, he will take you to court. When you reach to court, and this I'm talking from a personal experience, you reach to court and you've been charged with speeding. The first day you're charged, they give you a charge sheet. There is no evidence of that you are speeding. They have not put the speed gun camera, so you don't know how to plead. So you don't know whether to plead, I am guilty, so that you can do away with the case immediately, or you plead not guilty and you don't have the evidence. So we want evidence to be there in the file by the time you are charged, so that if you've showed me speed gun, you say that I was speeding and I've seen the speed gun evidence, then I will plead guilty and I'm given instant fine, and there's no need to go to court. Yeah. But every day you go to Milimani Law Courts, you go to Makadara, you go to Kibera, there are hundreds of people who probably refuse to pay a bribe.
Sure.
Yeah, and they have come with a traffic offense and they are filling the court system. And this deny us the opportunity to deal with very serious cases like corruption. Yeah. Corruption cases are taking, NYS, for example, this is, I think, 8 years down the line. It is not resolved. Look at murder cases that are happening, murder cases that happened in 5 years ago. I remember a case we were dealing with of extrajudicial killing of a man who had been killed in a police cell by an OCS in Ruaraka. The case took 6 years. 6 years for this person to wait for justice. That is taking longer. Look at sexual cases that my colleague Esther was talking about that had taken 10 years in the justice system. And last we met the Chief Justice last week on Friday, and we raised these issues, and she said these are cases that are troubling her, that cases should not take longer than 3 years in the court system. Because remember, if a case like of murder has happened, in 5 years' time, the witnesses have forgotten, and they can't clearly remember what happened in that time, and so you can see justice is defeated in that issue. So systemically, I think we really need to look at these petty offenses, so that we can be able to look for diversion, how these cases can be diverted. I mean, if I'm drunk and disorderly, for example, do I have to go to court? Aren't there any other way that we can deal with
other ways of dealing with it? City, you've been pensive for a while.
Because this isn't a simple matter. You see, there's an increased awareness that people have. So in some of these communities, what you're considering sexual offenses were not considered sexual offenses. So people didn't report them. They are now aware they're reporting them. But then when you follow the justice system and you mete out what is actually mandated by law, it then becomes another problem. Yeah. The discussion of, but we could have agreed, we could have understood each other, we could have dealt with this culturally. And then there is, now this is what I always bring up, are our police forces adequately equipped to deal with these many problems that they encounter? Because these are problems and they're real problems. But why is it that we keep finding that extrajudicial killings are constantly featuring? Why must they constantly feature? What is the reason behind it? Why is it that you have repeat offenders, people who commit crimes and they're constantly committing crimes? Why do you have people in jail who are innocent? The US, which is supposed to have a very robust justice system, it is reported they have something like 2.3 people incarcerated in their jails. It's argued that million. Okay. It is argued that something like, say, tens of thousands of people are innocent. And yet in the last 30 years, only 3,000 people have been released from that system because they have been found to have been jailed wrongly. Now, a system such as that one, and I'm thinking of ours, and I'm looking at the problems from all sides, and I'm thinking, how on earth do you get to solve this particular problem? Because you talk to the police, they have their side of the story.
Yeah.
You talk to the person on whom the crime is meted, they have their side of the story. The criminal will tell you, I wouldn't be committing a crime if this and this and this happened. So it's a vicious cycle, and that's what I'm saying. It's a vicious cycle which at some level doesn't seem to end. And you know why it doesn't seem to end? The highest officers in the land where they're supposed to set an example of probity and following the law, that's where people don't follow the law at all. Forget not following, they break the law.
They don't know example.
No, they are the worst possible examples you could actually think of.
There's something you've mentioned there, City. I mean, in terms of communities and their perception of a crime.
Yes.
For example, why would we have, like, Joseph, you're telling us 66% of cases in the Kilifi courts being on child sexual violence? Is it because really that this community is so violent against its children, or is it the understanding of the community versus the law and the law enforcers and understanding of the law? What is it? I mean, you can tell us, Esther. You've dealt with some of these victims and all.
Yeah, and it's true what Siti is saying. Cultural norms play a major role. You know, I worked on a case in Mombasa, and I remember trying to convince the young girls to actually just come forward. And I remember talking to the teacher there and saying, you know, here, once you're 11 and you look like, you know, puberty, you're considered a woman. And so this girl was saying she was 11, and the mom said, as you live today, you've seen so-and-so, our neighbor, yeah? You need to come with a packet of unga. You're of age now. So when you tell an 11-year-old girl that in the evening she needs to come with a packet of unga, where is she supposed to get that? So that just makes her very vulnerable. So there's also a conversation about behavior change. Because, I mean, we cannot say that because this was our culture and now, you know, it's obsolete, doesn't work anymore, we continue doing those things that are retrogressive. So that conversation has to be, and that's why we want everybody on the table. And that's why court users committees have been very effective. We are all saying that this is a system that we are all using. This is my experience, the way City is saying, this is my experience, I hear your experience, and we're trying to make things work.
Find each other halfway.
Yeah, find each other halfway. But also, issues of psychological effects of this violence. It just affects people. I want to seek justice. Like, I had a client who was arrested like that.
Our time is coming to an end. I mean, it's just when the conversation is getting interesting. Esther, thank you very much for joining us. Esther Njuguna is from the International Justice Mission. Joseph Kariuki as well. So you'll have a happy Sunday, and we'll be in church this Sunday for Freedom Sunday to hear the more of these conversations, and we hope to have more conversations on this. I mean, we've got very many experiences. Just come even after this month, so we can continue getting the experiences from what you're hearing on the ground. Joseph, thank you very much for joining us. Next time, be here.
Thank you, Eric. Thank you, City, and thank you, Ndu. Have a good one.
Thank you,
too,
Joseph.
Esther. Thank you. Have a lovely day.
Thank you.
This is the Situation Room, the only way to start your day.